welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Turn the Page. I'm your host, Jen.
And this is Jessica. Hi, thanks so much.
And I am here with an author to whom it is such an honor and a delight to be speaking right now. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Yes, I am Chuck Tingle, and my book is Camp Damascus.
Oh, this book was fantastic, and everybody here at the library who read it was just floored. It really has stayed with us.
It was so good. I literally cannot stop talking about it, and I don't say literally, figuratively.
But before we get into it too much, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your journey to this book and maybe your career as a writer and how it led you to this project.
Oh, wow. Well, that is a big question for someone like Chuck. I have a very unique journey, and I can talk about that. I would just say, starting off, I hope that if there are listeners not familiar with my way, that they can hear this journey and think maybe my own unique journey towards creating something can amount to some larger project that Buckaroos start to get behind, because it is very unique. But what's funny about that is that I guess I think we all have a unique journny. There's no one right way to create a piece of art or to write a novel. My way was originally self-publishing erotica, which I guess in this day and age is becoming a more common way for people to get in, just self-publishing in general, building an audience that way. But I would say also the erotica that I published was always seen as very unusual. I would say I always knew it was unusual, but I didn't think that it was, it's not that unusual. Maybe the difference between something being weird versus unique. I have unique sensibilities about, I guess, the limits of joyful romance, the limits of talking about sexuality, especially queer sexuality, in a way that is, I think, shocking to many, but hopefully that they can look later on and think, well, why not? Why not write this story about a dang billionaire T-Rex that's going to give everyone a chuckle? And then you think about it and you think, well, why not bring an element of fun and fantasy into sex, which I think has a lot of maybe a lot of guilt associated, and a lot of just hanging over it is so much seriousness. And I think that having a little fun with that is kind of something that I was trying to do. So a lot of Buckaroos know me from Pounded in the Butt by My Own Butt, or Space Raptor Butt Invasion, or all these other ways. And I think that brought a lot of joy to a lot of Buckaroos. And through my journey of doing that, I think finding ways to weave in social issues to what I was talking about, defy expectations in that way, kind of led me to build a following. And then I reached out to Nightfire, great publishers who are publishing Camp Damascus, and said, I have a horror novel. Would you like to publish it? So that it was really the journey, was building through self-publishing and then kind of switching genres. Long rambling answer. So
Totally fine. I loved your book.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Yay.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. I really loved that answer too, and I think that I can really see a very direct link between the erotica that you were writing and this book, even though maybe on the surface they might seem like very different. I think that what you said about rejecting guilt and rejecting shame is such an important part of this too. So could we maybe use that as a segue to talk about Camp Damascus?
Yes. When horror was always a big a genre for me. Um, and I have a thing I like to talk about of kind of the maligned genres being comedy, horror, and romance, or romance and erotica. Are the ones that kind of the high high class snooty buckaroos will look down on and say, well, that there can't be real art there. And that is always where I have been inspired and where I like to play. With erotica, of course, and then moving to horror from that, there is a through line where I think the reason that those are looked down upon is that they are seen as of the body, where you were eliciting a reaction of with erotica, arousal or romance, comedy, laughter, and then horror, fear. These are kind of a change in the format of storytelling, where other parts of storytelling, you're supposed to go on this journey. There's a beginning, a middle, and end in a very specific kind of way. But all these three genres are looked down upon because they are seen as less intellectual, because they are eliciting bodily functions actually, and so that is just seen as, thrown to the side. And by playing there, I think that you can really dig out truth. I think that's a lot of the time why comedy or satire can really get to the heart of truth over history we see, and also horror as well, and romance in a lot of ways. So I think the connection is there. For me, it was thinking, well, which what I like are going to weave through, and I think probably maintaining queer themes was important to me. It goes through the two, and then also there are things that I talk about. There are hundreds of erotica Tingleverse shorts, but those who've read a lot of them will see there's a theme of what I see as kind of the darkness of what to fear, the things that I fear, kind of carry through actually. And so I don't want to give too many spoilers of what is really going on at Camp Damascus, but there are themes that I think carry through the erotica tinglers of, I guess what I can say without giving too much away is, I tend to think the difference between fantasy and science fiction is that fantasy is explained by magic, and that's not really the point of it. Whereas science fiction, you have this incredible event, and it is tried to at least explain through some level of science. And I think maybe a twist of Camp Damascus is that you think it will be a horror fantasy where it is really a horror science fiction, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So first of all, I have to say, as a and Jen knows this too, as a former or recovering film theory person, what you said about horror and comedy and romance and erotica, like all about the body, 110%. I learned about film theory through horror, but what we learned was that the physical reactions you get from watching a horror movie are pretty much the same as you get from watching like slapstick comedy, or just, you feel, yes. Which is why I think
visceral.
It's visceral, 110%. But another thing I just kind of wanted to add, when you're talking about Camp Damascus as sort of horror fantasy, the themes that are running throughout it, I was really, I really was intrigued. And again, I don't want to give too much away, but I loved that there was like a very nicely woven Peter Pan theme running through it. And to me, I'm reading Camp Damascus and I'm like, this is a coming of age story. This is like a really beautiful coming of age story. I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Oh, yes, of course. Well, I will say, interestingly, I thought the Peter Pan and the fairy tale elements, I was worried, it's too on the surface. And you were actually the first that had actually even brought it up. So it's part of me thinks maybe it's kind of too deep now. But the point of that was the theme of the book is, and if you were to say the thesis. There's a few, but I think one of the main ones is that we can take these stories that we all have, and depending on how we interpret them, get completely different stories. And so, to show that as a sort of larger artistic piece, I wanted to make a layer cake of themes where you have the literal story of Camp Damascus, which is right. So you have the biblical one. Anyone who knows different Bible references will kind of see the characters. Probably mostly that is Saul's story, who in the Bible is Saul on the road to Damascus. And then there's other things and then there's the fairy tale layer, which is references and allegory to Peter Pan. And if you stack those three on top of each other, kind of artistically, what you can say is not only is the story saying interpreted throughout history however you want, you're also creating a story with that sort of thing going on where you could just read this and say, I'm going to read the Peter Pan version now and say, oh, very interesting that this community called Neverton that wants all of the young people there to act young when they are all actually in their 20s because they've been held back 2 years, and wants to keep the children from aging, all these different elements. And I will say, Peter Pan, I think once it comes out, I'll talk about this a lot more because there's so much. But if you were to know that going in, I think that the amount of characters you would see is connecting to these different ways and themes is going to shock bookers. And I hope actually create a way for them, at least give it a little reread value, or if you were to read it a second time, you could say, okay, I'm going to try to look for those. And there is a lot, actually.
Yeah, wow.
I've read it 3 times already.
Oh
so just letting you know, the minute it came past my desk, Jen and I were like screaming. And then I just started reading it immediately. And I read it 2 more times, and I've been screaming about everybody about like how they need to pick it up when it comes out.
Oh,
so
gosh.
I
love everything you just said too, because with the fairy tales and all of that, like it is a book that itself cares deeply about books. And I think it cares about the way that we find ourselves or discover ourselves in books. And I was wondering about like how you, like without getting into too much, because we do want to talk around things, like how did you choose the texts and things that you wanted to include, and did that sort of shape the story, like the texts that sort of spoke to you in that way to make it here?
Yes, you mean specific influences for Camp Damascus as far as what I was drawing on?
Yeah, I think so. Because like there's a lot of also without, don't want to spoil, but like you talk about some medieval literature too. And
okay, yes.
I'm a medieval historian. I did that before I did libraries. So that was, oh gosh, that was very exciting to me. But I was wondering if you could talk about, the way that like the references maybe function in the story in the sort of journey of the protagonist, maybe if that makes sense.
Thank you for noticing, because I think another thing our readers might be interested in is that there's a lot of lore in Camp Damascus, and I think it's interesting that it's almost all real. I think that on the surface level, you might read some of these Theban names or the books that are referenced, and those are actual old texts that do actually say these things. So I tried to, I think I got lucky in the sense of the story that I was already planning. When I went back and started to read, hey, what would it be like if the church historically was doing these things? Is there any version that we could take actual events or things or additional texts that are kind of overlooked, and see if those could point in that direction? And funny enough, there is just, when you do the research, there is a lot of really strange and unusual things. The painting of the mayfly that really no one really understands why there's this mayfly in the religious painting. Those are all real things. And every demon mentioned in the book is an actual, they're not mentioned in the actual text of the Bible, but they are in different historical contexts mentioned as real demons. So there is a lot in there that honestly, I think well, maybe it speaks to what I was saying. Maybe it wasn't lucky, but you can really just interpret these stories any way that you want. And there is so much material to draw from that I could just find really interesting texts. The thing about, I believe, the writer of Dante's Inferno, I'm actually saying that they want to dig up the bones and reburn them for heresy. What's funny is that the editor, one of the editors said, we couldn't find the source for this. And then I looked it up and I found it. So it's probably, I think that's somewhere between rumor and truth. But there's at least versions of these stories getting passed around that are just so fascinating.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have to say, I really I'm a huge fan of deep dives and deep digs. And, it's so funny because I like to talk about all that stuff too. And then people forget though, also people will say, for instance, what is it? Oh, Lilith was mentioned in the Bible. And then I'm like, no, actually it's this really obscure text of XYZ. And people are like, no, I really thought she was. And it's like, no, not at all. And I remember actually there was some interview with Neil Gaiman where he had read, he had heard an interpretation that there were 3 Eves made. Oh. And I don't know if it was just his specific, I guess pastor that, described it or, but he had heard that I think there was a second Eve that was created and Adam saw her created and was just so disgusted, from that they had to scrap her but it's interesting because you do hear things like this and I love it when they pop up in literature, and it was just so much fun to read everything in Camp Damascus.
Wow. Well, thank you. I'm so glad. I think an interesting thing about my career as a writer is even in the sense of erotica, where I would have these stories with a title and a cover that they found outrageous, saying, oh, well, this is creamed in the butt by my handsome living corn. And then part of the joy that you can get from that is you dig below the surface and whoever picks up and reads it says, wait, this is actually a meditation on grief or something like this. And so what will happen there is I think I have learned that there's a lot of joy if you have the audience who's willing to dig deeper in burying treasures for those who are kind enough to take their time and go on the journey of your art. Because I would say with reading, that is a huge undertaking. As far as mediums go, if you're a musician, say, hey, check out my song, someone has to dedicate 3 minutes to you. It's really not that difficult. Even a filmmaker, that's 2 hours. But then you go on to writing a book, and your audience is giving you days, weeks of time. So I do really like to take the time to bury something as kind of a gift for those who are willing to go on this journey. I mean, I have nothing but thanks and gratitude that this book is even getting read in the first place.
The book is such a gift. And so thank you as well for writing it and for allowing us to read it, because
and
it's just
for talking to
yes.
us.
Oh my gosh. It's just, I'm going to recommend it to everybody. And I think it is a book, as you said, that rewards multiple readings and wanting to go on that sort of journey and dig deeper and see things with new eyes. And just thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, it's again, it's one of those that I call instant staff pick.
Yes. Yeah.
Usually they know. They're like, oh, it's a weird book. It's Jessica's staff pick. But I get a lot of compliments.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yes. Well, and that helps. So I mean, books, as you know, with a library, it is interesting medium because of how much it is word of mouth, how much it is enjoying something and giving it to someone else and telling them. And I really think it's beautiful in that way. There's so much humanity to it as an art form because of the time and dedication it takes. And then the trust. You are saying, I need something to keep me company, to walk on this journey with me for a couple of weeks. And you're going to go to someone and say, I'm going to trust you to tell me a good walking partner. That's a huge leap that I think is pretty unique to writing. I think it's really beautiful.
I think it's really an act of empathy too, because you're being asked to empathize with the people you're reading about who might not be like you. You're being asked to empathize with the person who gave you the book, who saw something of themselves in it and maybe saw a little bit of you too. So I think it really is, about love. And that's
100,
like the whole point.
Yeah, without giving away too much about the book.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah.
Thank you again so much for joining us.
Really.
Oh, of course, yes.
All right. Listeners, please check out Camp Damascus. By the time that you hear this, it will be available. So please go to your favorite independent bookstore or library or wherever you like to go to get your books. Thank you so much. And it is time to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.